In this video, I'm going to share with you my #1 secret to getting started with slide guitar. Coming up. Welcome back to the channel. I'm RJ Ronquillo. If you're new here, thanks for joining me. I often get asked about how to go about starting to learn slide guitar, and I wanted to share with you today my #1 tip that I think is the most beneficial. I know for me, it's what made the biggest difference in me learning how to play slide. Before we get started, if you're into these kinds of videos, click that subscribe button so you stay notified. Okay, my #1 tip for all of you people that are interested in learning slide guitar, and that is setting up your guitar properly for slide. In an ideal situation, yeah, it's great to have a guitar dedicated just for slide playing. You know, one that's always set up and tuned just for slide. Now, I realize many of you only have one guitar, which is fine. That's kind of how I started. So way back in the day when I first tried to play slide, and some of you may have a similar story, I went to the local music store, bought a cheap metal slide, went back home, put the slide on the strings, and ew, what an awful sound. It definitely wasn't sounding anything like my heroes like Elmore James or Duane Allman. It was actually this Strat, my first guitar, which is a great guitar, don't get me wrong. I had it strung like the way I do now, which is with 10 gauge strings, kind of medium to low action, but it wasn't sounding right. Like I immediately put the slide on the strings and it just sounded tinny, it sounded really thin. It wasn't sounding right, it wasn't feeling right. And it kind of bummed me out to the point where I put my slide in the drawer and gave up. Fast forward to many years later, I had a few more guitars now, and I designated one of them just for slide playing. And that's when I really started learning how to play slide. That's when I really started enjoying it. So while I'm not saying you have to go out and buy another guitar just for slide, there's a few things you can do with the guitar that you already have, and I'm going to tell you. Okay, to set up your guitar for slide, there's two main things that we need to modify. #1, we need to raise the action. By that, I mean raise the string height. What we're looking for is to get more distance between the strings and the actual fretboard. And #2, is increasing our string gauge. Bumping up in string gauge will help us achieve a little bit more tension and achieve a better tone, essentially the tone that we're looking for. But let me go back to talking about raising the string height. So why do we want to raise the string height on a guitar? Well, for slide, because we're using something heavier than our finger on the string, it's going to have the tendency to press the string down to the fretboard and onto the fret, which is not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is enough string height to when we press the slide on the string, it's not fretting down on the fretboard. It's not resting on the fretboard. We want it basically suspended above the fretboard when we have the slide on it. Having a lower action like you might have on a standard guitar, it's going to make it sound, it's going to make it more difficult to get a cleaner tone. So this is just kind of like a standard guitar setup. When I press down with a metal slide, it sounds very tinny and very thin. It's certainly doable, but it's not the tone that we're looking for. It's kind of a harsh, brash tone, and there's not a lot of sustain. Technically, we should be sliding the slide across the strings, not fretting down the string. So in order to raise the action on most guitars, you're going to want to adjust it at the bridge. So on something like a Stratocaster or even like a Telecaster, they have individual saddles. So what you want to do is take the Allen wrench and raise each saddle up just a little bit. It doesn't have to be way up high. We're not playing lap steel here or anything. So just enough to where when you press the slide against the strings, it's not pressing down to the fretboard. On something like a Gibson style bridge, there's 2 thumb screws usually on both sides of the bridge, and you're going to raise the entire bridge together instead of the individual saddles like we did on the Strat or the Tele. And in order to do that easily, what you want to do is loosen up the strings to decrease tension that's keeping the actual bridge down. So loosen up the strings, and then you want to raise the height of the bridge. Now, if you're planning on using an acoustic, it's a little bit more difficult. There's 2 things that I would do on an acoustic. If you're lucky, sometimes the acoustic is already set up with a higher action. It might be like a cheap acoustic that you have laying around or that you bought at a garage sale. But essentially, you want to take it probably to a qualified repair person or a luthier, but you're going to shim underneath the bridge on an acoustic. So what they'll do is they'll put like a little, thin shaving of wood or paper, or a couple of them, underneath the saddle on the acoustic bridge, just to raise it up a little bit. And you kind of have to do it by trial and error, which is why I don't recommend, a normal lay person like me to do it. I would take it to your local guitar store, your local guitar repair guy. But another thing that you can do in a pinch on an acoustic is, if it has a truss rod, which this actually doesn't because this is from 1940, but most modern acoustics will have a truss rod, like electrics. What you can do is loosen the truss rod just a little bit, and what that's going to do is create a bow in the neck, which for normal playing, we don't want. We don't want a bow. We want it kind of perfectly straight. But what the bow is going to do is it's going to increase that distance between the string and the fretboard, which is what we're looking for when we're setting up for a slide guitar. So that's something that you could probably do on your own. Just don't over loosen it. Maybe a quarter turn, maybe a half turn, and that should be it to create enough relief, which is going to increase that distance. So that's kind of the absolute minimum of what you would need to do to start playing slide guitar right. But there's another thing that you might want to do that will help you even more, and that is increase the string gauge on your guitar. So why do we increase the string gauge? So having more tension on the strings can really help with slide playing and playing cleanly. Actually, raising the action kind of increases the tension just a little bit, which is great, but something else that can really help is going up in gauge and putting slightly heavier strings on your guitar. So normally when I play guitar, I usually have 10s, sometimes 9 gauge strings on my electric guitars. But when I play slide guitar, I like to go up to 11s. I feel that 11 gauge strings on an electric is a good starting point for most tunings, most open tunings for slide guitar, whether it be open E or open G. And having heavier strings is going to give you a little more tension. And the reason why I talk about more tension is because before I was talking about we don't want the slide weight to, essentially bend the string down to where it's touching the fretboard or the fret. So when we have a tighter string, it's going to be harder for the heavier slide to get that string down to the fretboard. So having increased string height plus a heavier gauge string is going to give you the tension that I think is ideal for slide guitar playing. So on my Tele, I've got 11 gauge flat wound strings. You don't have to use flat wounds. You can use round wounds or half wounds, whatever you feel like. But I've got this set up with 11 gauge flat wounds tuned to open E. And just feeling it, it just feels really solid and really tight. It's not a guitar setup that I would want to do a lot of bending with, or, I can still fret notes, I can fret chords, but I can also use this heavy, thick walled glass slide and play. And the strings are not touching the frets, they're not touching the fretboard. And And it feels great. It feels slick. It feels smooth. The tone is clear. The notes are clear. I'm getting the sustain. I mean, I could probably... You know, I can get notes to sustain longer. This setup just feels right for slide guitar. It's kind of what made the difference as far as me continuing learning how to play slide guitar. Once I had my guitar set up like this, I kind of felt slide guitar was easier to learn, definitely more enjoyable. I really think that a properly set up slide guitar will help you sound better, play better, and help you stick with it. All right, folks, if you enjoyed this tip and want to improve your slide guitar playing even more, then be on the lookout for my new course, How to Play Slide Guitar from Beginner to Playing Your First Classic Song. This course is finally going to be released very soon, and to get notified before everyone else, click the link in the description to get on the early bird list. And as a special bonus for signing up for the early bird list, you'll get a free slide guitar lesson video on one of my secrets to soloing and coming up with cool licks on slide guitar. I think you're really gonna dig it, and you'll get it for free just by signing up to be on the early bird list. So go ahead and click that link down in the description. If you enjoyed this video, click that thumbs up, leave me a comment down below. If you'd like to see more videos like this or just like to see my pretty face, click that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.